Sally, the governor announced contact sports would not be played in the fall, meaning football and soccer will be moved to the spring. Can those teams continue to practice?
And JP, before we start, I just wanted to, I received an email this weekend, and it was from a student athlete down south. And really just, it made me realize why we do what we do. And I'm going to read a quote that she said to me, and it made me smile because I really never had put this in perspective of what we're doing. And so the quote is, "You guys have a hard job, like trying to put a puzzle together after the dog ate half the pieces and you lost the lid with the picture." And it just made me smile to think, yeah, you know, what we're doing, it is ever changing, and from day to day, we do not know what that picture is going to look like. You know, it just brought a smile to my face that the student athletes understand that we're trying to do the best that we can. And so when we release these guidelines today, I just wanted to put that in perspective, that it is for the student athletes.
That being said, even though the dog ate half of our pieces to the puzzle, can those teams continue to practice like football and soccer, the ones that are moved to the spring?
Well, the new governor's orders are saying that for summer workouts that football, wrestling, and soccer are not able to participate. And then I found out last night that they did include basketball to those governor's orders. So at this point, we now have 4 sports that are not able to participate in summer workouts.
For the sports that can continue the summer workouts, like cross country and volleyball, we're currently in a 5-to-1 ratio with those pods right now. How long will that last?
You know, I think the governor's orders right now are through the end of July at least. So we're planning that 5-to-1. You know, minimal equipment use, a lot of sanitation, social distancing, mask wearing, all that will continue throughout the summer.
As you'd mentioned, it is a fluid situation and some of the guidelines have changed. Do coaches need to have a COVID test before working out with athletes?
That too has changed. Remember, we keep saying everything's ever changing, and you know, it's being flexible. But the governor's office made a phone call to me a couple weeks ago and decided that we are not going to test the student athletes or the coaches anymore, that we will do those tests if we need to do contact tracing and somebody has tested positive and we need to go, and that's when we'll do the testing.
You mentioned the student athletes. Do they need to wear masks when working out?
And that is yes. The new governor's orders are even mask wearing when exercising. So I know that's been really difficult, especially for cross country. That was a question I received over and over. Does that even mean running in cross country? Calling up to the governor's office and asking that question, and that is yes, that all athletes during exercise and adults, you know, out there need to wear masks.
A lot of people have been waiting for this day. The NMAA recently announced plans for fall athletics and the upcoming school year. Now, assuming that school starts on time, what sports will be played when school begins?
Well, I think that's the question, JP, is what's on time? Right now, our schools are working to get in the hybrid model for the mid-August, whenever they start school. But there are some schools that may start remote, and some may not go to the in-classroom even half-time until after Labor Day. So when we say sports starting on time, we are looking that cross-country and fall golf would start mid-September. We have shifted that back so that our schools can get and our kids can get acclimated to their new environment, and then we will participate in sports.
Will those sports be able to begin if schools start in a hybrid model of some people in-person learning and some people online? Can those teams work out on the days when they don't have in-person school?
Sure, you know, and that is a school district decision. What we are looking at is if the public education department says we're in a hybrid model or we are in school full-time, then we will have sports. Now, if the public education department says we are 100% remote learning like we did in March, April, and May to end the school year, then we will not be in sports. But at this time, the public education department has told the schools you can be in a hybrid model. Whatever that looks like for the school, that is up to the school decision. So since we would start the school year in hybrid at this point, we will be able to participate in sports.
You mentioned cross country. I know a lot of people have questions with each sport, so let's start with cross country. You mentioned when you thought you saw it starting, but what sort of changes need to be made?
Well, we're going to have to look at the mass gatherings, and I'm not calling cross country mass gatherings, but there's a lot of kids that are at a typical cross country meet. So we're going to have to look at shrinking that size of teams that can go to one location and run. We will also have to look at staggered times. You know, you're on the bus, you're there, you warm up and run, and then you leave. And it's not going to be hanging around and watching all the races anymore. And so we will put those guidelines out to the cross-country coaches. I have been in contact with them. They are aware that there will be some changes to cross-country. But all the coaches are willing and just to do whatever it can so that their athletes can run and compete.
What about volleyball? How does that look for the upcoming season, and when will that start?
Well, we're going to go ahead and shift volleyball to a start date of October. October to really second week somewhere in December, where we will have a 10-week season. And in all of these sports, we're looking at a 10-week, somewhere in there, 10, and we're trying to look at the spring sports even being a little bit longer than 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. But volleyball will be shifted to an October start date and not right away when school starts in September.
The calendar of estimated start times for each sport can be found online, but let's go over some more of them. Basketball and swimming and diving won't even begin until January, is that correct?
That is correct. And all sports will be January through June, except we'll do fall golf, but the championships for golf will still be in the spring. We will have cross country when school starts, and we will have volleyball October through December. Other than that, all the sports will start in January, and that includes basketball and swimming and diving.
What about the contact sports that will be postponed from the fall? When do you anticipate football and soccer starting? What's that timeline?
We're looking at right now around February. I think it's like around February 22nd, third week in February, and we will go through about the second week in April. Again, a 10-week time period. Now, football, we're looking at all these overlaps. Football fits right in there pretty well. Soccer, there is a concern with soccer because of the club soccer world. I am in constant contact right now with the club soccer leaders and trying to figure out how we can make this work so our student athletes who do play club soccer can also play high school.
What about the schedule for Spirit?
Spirit is a little bit different. We usually have competitions, and we will still have competitions. However, it will not be mandated that they have to have 3 competitions in order to participate in the state championships. Our state championships for Spirit will still be the end of March, normal time frame. However, like I said, the not having to do competitions in order to participate in the state championships, that will be waived. But we will still have competitions for Spirit.
Wrestling usually takes place in the winter, but now won't begin until when?
We have really, wrestling is probably the hardest sport. If you think about it, the one-on-one contact in wrestling. So in order to make sure that we have a really strong wrestling season, we have shifted that back, even past January. We have shifted that back to the April through June time frame, trying to make sure that we do have that sport and there's no issues when it comes to the contact with wrestling.
The traditional spring sports will still compete in the spring, just a little later. How late? What does it look like for baseball, softball, tennis, golf, track and field?
Because of the overlap. Again, that's the hard thing, is trying to figure out this overlap. But I was very happy. We sent out a survey to our superintendents in regards to, even if graduation happens in May, can we continue to compete in spring sports through June? And over 85% of our superintendents said yes, go ahead and let's compete through June. And the superintendents understand that our spring sport athletes did not get to compete last year. And so we want to do whatever we can to make sure they have a strong, solid season. And so because of the overlap and we have to shift them a little bit, we will start in April. Beginning of April, I think that is a time frame, JP. It's all these dates are in my head. But we will finish in June, giving them hopefully a 12-week season.
In all of these sports, do you anticipate a shorter season and number of games or matches that are played? Will they play just a district schedule?
You know, like I said, we are looking at 10 weeks per sport. We're going to be consistent across the board, and maybe 12 weeks for spring. We're hoping for a little bit longer for spring. So in that time frame, yes, the game limitations have decreased. And we will have that out so people can see what does that look like. But again, it is not going to be normal. But our kids are going to be able to compete. And whether it's 26 games is a normal for basketball, and it may be 18, we're still competing, and that is the goal. And we are still going to have, raise that trophy up for our student athletes.
You mentioned the trophies. What about the playoffs? How does that look with a shortened season?
And I think that's still to be determined. So when the guidelines come out, JP, I think everybody will see the calendar. For example, swimming. There's a state championship on 2 weekends for swimming. Are we going to have it on 2 weekends? I do not know at this point. But we want to make sure that it's in the calendar just in case. And when I say that is because in swimming, we're limited into the size of a swimming area. The deck, the stands at Albuquerque Academy, that is troublesome when it comes to a quote-unquote mass gathering. So we don't know at this time, are we going to have fans in the stands? Are we going to be able to? Are we not? We don't know how many people can gather in that building. So it may be that one weekend we have to do boys and one weekend we have to do girls. Or it may be that we will shrink, how many qualify, and we'll be able to do it on one weekend. But those are all the things. That's an example for swimming. Those are all the things that we still need to work out as to the playoffs. One thing about the playoffs and during the season is there is not going to be any overnight travel. So when you think about the playoffs, to have a Thursday, Friday, Saturday format for a championship, that's probably not going to happen until we see where, maybe it will happen in March, April, May at this point. But at this point, we have to plan that may not happen where we are able to have any student athletes in the hotel spending the night.
You mentioned that the travel restrictions with state tournaments and traditional, what we're used to seeing. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Will there be any travel restrictions during the year?
We have told us athletic directors when we make their schedule, and I'm going to meet with the ADs today, when they make their schedule, make sure you're not spending the night. So, for example, in football, if we have a football game and they're very far apart and it's usually a football game that they spend the night, we've talked to the athletic directors, meet in the middle. Find a neutral location to play that football game so you are not spending the night. So that is going to be some restrictions that it is going to be, we go down and play and we come back, that no overnight travel. And we're going to try to have the athletic directors think of games more in their regional area to accommodate the no travel restrictions.
What about traditional tournaments in sports like volleyball, basketball, baseball, softball?
Well, again, there goes the travel because tournaments are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday. And tournaments gather a large amount of crowds. So we are not going to be able to have tournaments this year and large meets. And we will discuss that with the athletic directors when it comes to scheduling. But is that something that we're going to have to shift for the 2021 school year is the tournaments, volleyball, pool play, the massive pool play, and then we have a big tournament. That's not going to happen. We need to think, and people need to think, you're going to go and play a game, a team, and then you're going to come home.
You touched upon it a little bit, but it's the question everyone wants to know. What about fans in the stands? Do you anticipate fans being able to watch sports like cross country and volleyball this fall? And what about the other sports during the year?
I'm hopeful, but I also have to prepare one way or the other. I need to prepare that there aren't going to be fans in the stands, and we need to prepare that there may be fans in the stands. Again, it's fluid, and we do not know at this time. And so our athletic directors are aware of that. We are trying, JP, right now to do a lot of things to make sure that if there are not fans in the stands, that we're streaming every contest. But if they can be fans in the stands, let's do it in a safe way. So ticketless. I've talked to the state and all the athletic directors about going ticketless when it comes to an event, or temperature checks when they come in. When they go into a facility, you have X's on the stand, so this is where they sit, and talk about, not yelling or chanting and things like that. So we are going to come into, have some good guidelines where maybe we can have fans in the stands, but we will follow these guidelines to make sure everything is safe.
Was there any consideration of moving traditional spring sports like baseball, softball, or tennis to the fall?
I would tell you in April there was, long time ago. You look back April, well, we're still in July, but when we started, the first thing you think of is no contact sports. Maybe we can shift. But as we started thinking about that and I started talking to coaches, the spring sports, they lost their season last year. And I've been saying on these Q&As, I will do anything to make sure our spring sports get to compete this year. And so if you shift them to the fall, again, those are times where we don't know what's going to happen still. We're trying to have sports, but what is going to happen when school starts? So in order to preserve the spring sports, it is best that we keep them in the spring and make sure that they have a good, solid season this year.
And lastly, how do you feel about the current plan and the schedule in place for the upcoming school year?
I'm hopeful. JP, I've said that over and over, and this is Plan B that we're releasing today. And I guarantee you we're going to have Plan C, D, E, and F. We just do not know. And you will see when the guidelines come out, it says subject to change. All I just ask is the athletes, the coaches, the parents, superintendents, athletic directors, we have to be flexible. We are educators, and I remember going into college as an educator. That was one thing that was always drilled in our head when we were going through college and becoming teachers and educators was you need to be flexible. And our educators are flexible, and that's what I am right now. We have to be flexible. This is Plan B, and it is a good Plan B. Is it ideal? It's not ideal because there is some overlapping that we have to look at, but we all need to be flexible. If that means that a student athlete plays 2 sports at once for a couple of weeks, then that's what happens. We don't have a rule where they can't do that. Does that mean our coaches might have to work with the club world when it comes to soccer? That might have to be happening, for our student athletes to make sure our student athletes get the best experience. And so it is not ideal, but it is workable. And it is workable if we work together. And that's administrators, parents, and I ask parents, you need to work with all of us. We are trying the best we can to make sure our student athletes get to play the games that they love. And I'm excited to see that we do have a plan. Again, I keep saying it is not ideal, but we have a plan, and we will play again, New Mexico.